I want to get into sales today and talk a little bit about sales approach. Now, I'm not going to dive into here's how to overcome objections or talk about your specific sales process, because I think that's customized and unique to everybody. I'm also not going to speak about one individual thing. What I'm going to talk about is really the idea that you coming back to sales, whether you're a business owner or you've got a couple of people in your business development group, I think these are tools and ideas that every single person can put into place. And so that's where I'm really going to focus. Recognizing also that anything I talk about today, if you start doing it today, there is a lag time. You are going to see the results of your sales activity today in 30 days, 60 days, maybe even 90 days, depending on your sales cycle. So I can never say enough that if you want a silver bullet, the silver bullet is start now. In fact, you should have started yesterday. And so you're going to find that urgency is something that is a bit of a theme for me. I think coming out of COVID, a lot of people have been feeling like this. If anybody's ever seen me present, I always include Chris Farley somewhere in my presentation. But really the key here is you can't go into sales and be thinking about business development in your business or as somebody on the sales team with this feeling. And the reason for that is that the way you feel, the emotions you have, and the confidence you bring to any selling process, any product or any service is critical, that as you're sitting across the table from people or across a Zoom call, that your confidence and your general emotion is one of now's the time, you feel good about it, there isn't any apprehension on your side. And so prospects and your clients are coming back to the market and they're already feeling a little unsure. They're already a little nervous, right? Whether it be about safety or whatever. You cannot share that. You have to be able to show up every day and be ultra clear that it is now the time, it is a great time to buy, it's a great time to restart things, because your confidence and your clarity needs to outweigh their indecision. It needs to outweigh their wishy-washiness, their feeling that if I don't make a decision or I procrastinate, that's going to be less risk. So your emotional state is really going to be a driver here. And I think I would just want you to make a note to check in and say, okay, if there's any issues I have to work that out. Otherwise, they're going to show up in all of my sales performance day to day. Before COVID-19, selling looked a little bit like this. We went through features, benefits. We talked about value, maybe a bit about price in that equation or in that conversation. And we oftentimes talked about ROI, the return on investment if somebody bought this. But we had the ability to ignore some of the people side because business was good and we could focus on some of those things that were really driven by our product or service. In selling after COVID, or at this period of, somewhat, I'll call it the slow recovery, really one of the key features now that you need to lead with is safety. And it's not only safety as in a restaurant where it's safe to come in our dining room, but it's also safe to be able to do transactions, that the risk isn't as high as people perceive. And there's been so much fight or flight for people that oftentimes, and I've seen it over the last few months, and I'm sure Clay has, people who are not totally rational. Business owners, I had a gentleman phone and say, should I lay everybody off? Why? There's been no change in your sales. But irrationally, he said, but somebody else in our industry is laying everybody else off, so maybe I should. And you realize that's not coming from a place of logic, it's coming from a place of panic. In selling, your prospects, your clients still may be in a bit of place of panic or fight or flight. And you have to bring them back and talk about safety of making a decision, safety of maybe a physical safety, but that becomes a number one topic. The second one is trust, developing trust and them feeling like that somebody is leading with relationship, and a good conversation and not just pushing a product or service becomes now critical. Then ROI actually increases in priority. And the reason that return on investment increases is because the nervousness people have and the fear of risk or making a mistake or losing cash now starts to mean that I'm thinking about everything I buy on when can I use it, what am I going to get out of it. So as I think about any service or product, I think about the ROI on that investment, because there's that sense of scarcity around cash in businesses and in people's consumers. And you have to be able to look and say, okay, encouraging them that this is the best place to put your money. This is the best ROI becomes important. And then the next piece around that is value. And so there's a little bit of a shift in value is not as high a priority as talking about ROI, and those things aren't nearly as important as safety and trust now. That means that instead of, if you've ever looked and sold like this guy, the used car salesman, or just thought it's just a matter of numbers, you really have to think about your selling process and how you show up for sales as being more like Oprah. Oprah is one of the best salespeople on the planet, and it's because everybody feels they know Oprah. They have a relationship with Oprah, right? They know about her personally. And because of all of that personalness, that connection, that trust factor, Oprah can sell Weight Watchers. She can sell whatever she wants to people, and they buy it in droves. But she's really aware that it's not driven by a slick sales presentation or features and benefits. It's driven by her enthusiasm, her confidence, and her relationship with people. So think about how you can emulate Oprah in that capacity. So a big thing I'm going to talk about is that sales is now an everyday experience. It's sales every single day. And what I mean by that is so often business owners and a lot of salespeople, in fact, or people, business development people, are focused on the activity of selling 2 or 3 or maybe 4 days a week. But it is now something you need to be doing every single day. What I mean by that is the tracking of sales. That this can no longer be something, I have a spreadsheet that is open every single day on my computer, and I am tracking sales. I'm tracking the progress of every prospect. I'm updating it. I'm checking in with who I haven't talked to. But there should be no confusion about where your numbers are in sales, where every prospect is, where your customers are, who is buying. If you're not getting reports like that on a regular basis, you need to start and be reviewing them every day. I love the idea that with my sales team that there is a daily, a weekly, and a monthly sales goal. And we, again, are tracking. I've seen this work super effectively across teams, that when you educate people on this is what we need to sell every day in order to survive and also thrive, people subconsciously just rise to the occasion. So at the end of every week, being able to check in with your team, or even with you if you're a solopreneur, it's critical that you have a goal, an objective every time. Now, this might be sales on a weekly basis, but on a daily basis, it's going to be an activity goal that ideally leads you to that weekly and monthly sales goals. This needs to become a team discussion. The number of companies I come into and say, well, when do you guys talk about sales? And they say, oh, well, the sales team talks about it every Monday. I was like, when does the rest of the organization talk about it? It doesn't happen in most companies. You need to have somebody, if you're, again, a small business and you don't have somebody, then there's got to be somebody outside your organization that you talk to. I often reference my good friend Dominic. He and I talked this morning about sales. What have you closed this week? What do you have on track? Where's that at? He and I provide that team accountability and that enthusiasm around sales that you're going to get in a team discussion. I love the idea of celebration, that an organization needs to start to celebrate sales, and it becomes part of, hey, everybody, the receptionist to the admin people to your consultants, everybody gets jazzed about, hey, sales, we're celebrating it. And it's the easiest way to bring sales to the forefront of the discussion without necessarily, I guess, the traditional sales manager approach of, I want to know about your numbers and I want to know what you did. And it's all sort of the heavy-handed accountability. So celebration is an easy way to do that. I like the idea that sales is part of the new culture. That, hey, everybody in our organization sells. We encourage sales. We love sales. That's the type of language that you have to have. And again, if it's just you have to look and say, okay, is my personal culture include sales as being a positive thing and a focus every single day? And then the last thing I'd mention is that sales now needs to include everyone. If prior to this, and I just did a webinar with a client company where they have, the owner has traditionally been the business development guy. He's got 14 team members, and he no longer can support all 14 people just on his efforts. And we've now had to call on or ask other people to step into a sales role. Now, it's not everybody making cold calls, but the reception is responsible for touching base with clients. Some of their consultants and their delivery people are now talking to clients and educating them on all the services they provide. Everybody has found a role in sales, and they are practicing it every week. Every single Friday, they have an action the following week that they're going to take in sales. And so it's now an everyone organization, or an everyone in the organization sales effort, and that's going to make a big difference. I like this picture because I think it sort of exemplifies the before and after. So the ground has fallen out from under us with this COVID situation. There was before where we were on a steady trajectory. We now have the ability where we've sort of crossed the chasm and business starts to come back. But that being said, a lot of things that's happened, and I'll give you an example, is renewing sales goals. And the reason this becomes important, so I had a client who in January said, our goal is $3.6 million in gross revenue. During the last few months with COVID, they've said our sales goal is 0. our sales goal is survival. Our sales goal is just keeping our people. Our sales goal is, in a lot of ways, panic. And now we've come back to say, okay, well, now it's July. We're 6 months in. We are back to the market. We're seeing people start to buy. We've got prospects. Our marketing is working again. We're getting inbound leads. What is our sales goal now? And with this, I want to be able to address the idea of, do you reduce the goal? Do you say, okay, well, listen, I've lost 3 months. I lost the second quarter of 2020. So I'm going to reduce it by, 25%. Or do you look and say, and challenge yourself to say, okay, how do we bring it back? There's a real risk with reducing your sales goal. And the reason for that is that, and it's mostly mental. If you say to everybody, listen, we're going to reduce the sales goal by, we lost 3 months to COVID, so we're going to reduce it by 25%. You now open the door for any time there's a challenge, whether it be societal, in your industry, oil prices are down, housing starts are slow, whatever it might be, to be able to say, oh, well, we'll just reduce the goal. I never want my sales group and I never want my organization to think that whenever things get tough, we just reduce our goals. So I would challenge you to bring it back and to be able to start to figure out, with 6 months left, how many more sales per month for the remaining 6 months do you need to make in order to recover Q2? And my favorite way to do that is with the classic thermometer. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be this specific type of image, but I actually found this and I loved it because it says, hey, we're this far of this month's goal. There's 28 days remaining. But where I like this is actually thinking about, some of those classic fundraisers, the church who's trying to raise $10,000, and the thermometer works up. And the important thing there is the incrementalization of a broad goal. So let's say, for example, you need to increase or make up $400,000 in sales for the balance of the year. To do that, you're not going to do it in one transaction of 400K. You're going to do it in transactions of 10, 20, 30, maybe $50,000. And so you almost need to be able to take this thermometer, and the same way if it was actually printed on the wall in our office, and we'd mark it up and be able to slowly increase the mercury inside or the temperature inside till we hit that goal. It's the exact same thing. There's nothing worse than having a sales goal that everybody sees as 400 with no ability to visualize every single day or every single week. I love the idea that if you have something like this, that it's printed off in the office, and it is something that literally people are taking a Sharpie pen or a felt marker and slowly filling it in. And every week we're seeing that 400K to 380 to 360 to 350 to 300 to 280, and it just counts down. As soon as people start to see some momentum on the sales side, they are going to become believers again, and that's going to allow you to start to move into that sales. This is true if you're just an individual. You have to look at what you're trying to come back from and incrementalize that, and either into dollars or into the number of deals. If you know you really need to get 18 clients to make up for it, great, then this thermometer's just got a goal of 18 individual accounts. I'm a big fan of measuring activity, and the reason for that is activity is the leading indicator of future sales potential. This is the most critical thing in the world. Oftentimes we can look at a business and say, hey, Q3 is going to be terrible for you. And they say, why? And we say, well, we look at the activity of your sales group or your company as a whole, and it's nowhere near the level it needs to be in order to be successful. And I'll tell you what I mean by this, or I'll explain this out in a little demonstration. Well, the last thing I should mention with activity is COVID-19 activity is way down. There is no shortage of salespeople and business owners who have stepped away from sales, either because they've bought into the story that nobody's buying right now, or they've just said, out of respect, we're not going to push people. But there's certainly been people who have said, I'm working hard from home, and I can think of a couple guys I know right off the bat who about 12:30 in the day are cracking a beer, and they look more like Homer Simpson than they do a activity giant. And so we have to get back to flexing that activity muscle. So here's an example of a business, and this could be across a team, across an individual owner, but normally what happens is knowing your numbers. So I've taken down the left-hand side 6 different tools, doing some direct mail, cold calls, a networking event, advertising. They're on social media, and they run an AdWords account through Google. And so you look at the volume that they produce on a monthly basis. And so let's presume they need 10 leads in order to be able to get a new client. And so this business, as they started it out, and maybe let's call this pre-COVID values, that they were able to generate 17 leads a month. And from that they were generating about 2 clients. Some months it was 2, other months it's 1. But they now realized that to really get back to be on pace, they need to increase the activity. So instead of having the mailers, instead of doing 100 mail pieces a month, it's got to go up to 125. That's going to increase, just give me 1 extra lead. But what I'm doing is, instead of, if you belong to a networking group, you need to join a second one. If you're doing some advertising, you need to double it. If you've got social media, you've got to be posting twice as much. And certainly with AdWords, you've got to be able to increase the number of impressions so that you've got that ability to be able to say, now I can generate 30 leads, which is 3 clients. It's almost the exact connection. But I've done this over and again with individual salespeople and with companies, and they never track the results of their actual activity to the number of leads it generates, and then knowing that the number of leads are going to get there. They say, well, we need to pick up 3 accounts a month. And so here's an easy example of how I'd work it back. I need 3 accounts, which means I need 30 prospects. This is the amount of activity I need to now produce to get my 30 prospects. And so that is a great place to be able to look and say, is this something I was tracking or can now start to track, again, as an individual, and this could be your activity for a given week or across an entire group of people in your company. I'd mark this as a bit of a to-do item. I think that knowing your numbers and being able to work this backwards is absolutely a key to success. The other reason I like that is because in terms of knowing your numbers is all of those sales predictors are going to be able to allow you to manage cash flow into the future and be able to know what the cash is looking like in the coming months and project that. It gives you some element of a weighted sales projection. Oftentimes I deal with sales teams where they just count the total and they go, oh man, we've got $4 million in the pipe. But when they actually look at the likelihood of them closing, it oftentimes works out to be 25% of that. And so I have to be able to weight my sales projections, which is something else that even as an individual, with every lead we have in our company, we say, what's the likelihood of them closing? And because that spreadsheet's open every day, we update it every day as we get emails and interaction with people. And then the last thing is total pipeline value. When I had a marketing agency, we knew that we had to have 3.6 million in total prospective deals because we needed to sell $600,000 and have it close every single quarter. And that if our total pipeline value wasn't about 3.6, out of that, we wouldn't get 600,000 in sales. So that's something else that a lot of people don't know, but coming out of COVID and into recovery now, you need to be thinking about, hey, how many total lead values do I need to have? What does that pipeline of sales need to look like so that I know that I'm going to be able to make my actual close numbers and my actual revenue numbers per quarter? I want to talk a little bit about sales time. Now, I didn't say sale time like we're going to go shopping. What I mean is sales time, setting your sales time. This is just an example of a salesperson's calendar where every single activity is designed around selling. Now, this may not be most business owners and even a lot of business development people, but the thing that I find most critical is I talk to people every week and I say, what part of your week is committed to sales? And they say, well, whenever I get a chance, I do sales. I have to tell you, in this recovery, the absolute thing that everybody in your organization needs to have is set sales time. I would describe these as 2-hour blocks of time. The reason it has to be 2 hours is because we always have the ability to fritter away at least 30 minutes. Getting a new coffee, updating the CRM, getting our comfortable chair. Oh, my database crashed, I've got to get back into it. Whatever excuses we find to be able to not start. And so I like the idea that over the course of 2 hours, the other thing is I think, well, I've done 30 minutes of prospecting or I've followed up with all the leads I have. I still have 90 minutes left. It forces you in a 2-hour block to get creative to say, well, what else can I do in sales? Because I've got another hour. And that is a critical piece to this. I like to do it away from my desk. Sitting at my desk is the least effective place for me to do sales work. I pick up the things I need for sales. Oftentimes I print my database off. I move it from a spreadsheet and I print it off and I work off a piece of paper. But the only thing there is my phone, the piece of paper, and there's no distractions. Get away from your desk, your email, and all the alarms to be able to focus. Tell other people that you're selling. Let people know. I found this with owners that you tell other people, listen, from 10 till 12 every day, I'm selling and I'm working on business development. They have an opportunity to join in on that, but at least they respect that that's what you're doing and they know that it's driving activity for everybody. And I do like if you have the ability to make it a team time. I found with clients in the past that if they can be able to say, all right, we're all going to do this. It's incredible how much activity they can generate. And it also points out how little they were doing before. Oftentimes people say, well, I'm making a few calls every week, and that turns out to be 2 or 3 when their target number needs to be 20. So I love this idea of sales time in your calendar every single week as being a critical thing. The reason this is so important is because otherwise, when do you do it? There's this famous thing, if you've ever, in my case, have done a lot of sales training with people, it's always Friday. Monday you don't feel like selling, and nobody wants to talk to anybody in sales or talk about business development Monday. So Tuesday we'll do it. And then Tuesday you're like, oh, I'm so busy following up with clients, but Wednesday I'm going to get to it. And before you know it, it's Happy Friday. And Friday is always the day you say, nobody wants to talk sales on Friday. So Monday, I'm going to be all over it. And the weeks just roll by. If it is not in your calendar every single day, man, it's before you know it, the month of July will be gone, August will be gone, and you'll be in a hurt and cash flow position for September. You have to start now for September. So let's talk about where do we start? And I think the critical place is our clients. You have to look at past clients, existing clients that may have stopped with you, but anybody that you can classify as a client. And I'll drill down on some of that. The first thing I got to do is be able to just invite them back. It's shocking to me the number of people who haven't just gone through and either announced over social media, through their database and email, by telephone, but letting people know we're open. The number of times even my wife and I in the last couple of weeks have said to ourselves, I wonder if they're open yet. I don't know. And we are not sure what business is open. We don't know what consultants are firing on all cylinders and which people are traveling or not traveling, or have got an online program that they're now delivering, or you have to educate people and invite them back. I think the next thing you need to look at is some flexibility in upselling them, downselling them, cross-selling them. The way the services that they may have consumed before, or the products they bought, the order volumes, frequency, all of that might change. So you have to be able to say, okay, here, we're gonna, you know what, you were at the weekly frequency, and now we're gonna put you at bi-weekly. We're going to upsell you into something that's got more care, more attention, more services. Potentially, some of your clients may have laid off some of their staff and may need more outsourced stuff from you. There is an opportunity to upsell there, but just being flexible on, not necessarily having package A, B, and C, and those are the choices for people. It has to be more flexible, and that might include new programs. I think for anybody who's been a personal trainer or at a gym, there's been a proliferation of new programs being offered online. Now, as things open back up, now you have the ability to say upsell, downsell. Well, you can come into the gym sometimes, or you can do it online. The restaurant, obviously, now you can come in and dine, but you can still pick it up at the curb. We still deliver to home. There's all sorts of new programs. Let people know that, your customers. I think to reduce their risk and increase the safety for customers, we have to talk about guarantees. Now, I don't mean a guarantee that's just, 100% satisfaction or your money back necessarily, but guarantees around everything from delivery time. That's been a frustration for people with it delivered. Even IKEA. I know a number of people who, while they've talked about all their online, their availability of product, ability to maintain inventory and to be able to deliver in a reasonable time, they've lost a lot of business, and a guarantee might be a program that brings that back with their customers. And then payment terms. I know a client of mine who has a unit cost of about $3,600. They've just implemented a 12-month, $300 a month payment term, and it is driving sales. People no longer are comfortable with the risk of $3,600 out at once. They quickly realized, oh, with a payment term system, we've adjusted that risk for customers. We've created more trust. Now the ROI goes up, and the value's there. And so they've hit all of those hot buttons with payment terms and new ways to finance things. I really just want to focus a minute on care. And I think the big thing here is I don't know how much you care until you really connect with me. Whether it's by Zoom, FaceTime, phone, like really connect with me as a human. Please stop connecting with me by email. It has to be through this idea of making a visual connection. Even by Zoom like we are today, or on Teams or on an online platform, it's more effective to see somebody and be able to make that connection with your customers. Asking those simple questions, how are you? Before we dive into which product you need, you want to start ordering again, ask them how they are. How can we help? Is there anything? When you lead with how are you and how can we help, the question of what product mix or what package they need or how they need to buy your services is going to become very clear. This is something that my coach asked me about 2 months ago. He said, how many people have you got in your database? I said, about 880. He said, have you called your entire database yet? My first response was probably the same as yours. Are you mad? No, I haven't called everybody. He's like, what are you waiting for? There's 880 people that might need your help. Get on the phone with them. You wonder what you're going to do for your 2 hours of sales time. Phone everybody you're connected with and reconnect with those people. And I got to tell you, there's a whole bunch of work there that's come out. I was actually just speaking to a past client in real estate this morning. We bumped into each other. And one of the things we talked about was that very thing of reconnecting with everybody in his database. We started doing that in the fall, and probably it took him about 4 months to get through to everybody. And within a couple of weeks, he started to see the first deal. He's now had a very, very busy spring in real estate. And it is because, he said, of all the work he's done connecting with his existing circle of influence and customer base. Let's talk about prospective customers or prospects. What we need to do here is reheat them, right? So much like the microwave, we're going to take the old leftovers of prospects, those people that you probably didn't talk to for 2 months, or maybe they didn't respond to your email for 2 months, and we got to reheat them and get that going again. And so I hope your prospects are better than something left over like this guy's putting in the microwave. But let's presume that there's gold in some of that there. And I want to walk through some of the ways to approach prospects or prospective customers. The first thing is, prospects have a really short memory. You know, they may have been totally interested in your service 3 months ago, but their whole life has been turned upside down, quite literally. And so you need to reconnect and re-educate them, and even just remind them of, hey, this is why we were talking. This is the place you were in. This was the value we saw. And my favorite example of this is, actually doesn't come from COVID, but comes from stampede time in Calgary. That oftentimes after stampeding for 10 days, and I would have to phone people, and I would have to remind them of all the things we talked about. Do you remember it was Wednesday? We were at the big tent. We were drinking Coronas. You said this, I said that. And then they're like, oh, yeah, you're the guy. Right. And I would have to re-educate them and almost start my whole presentation over again to get them back to the starting point, or rather, I guess in this case, the COVID ending point. And that's the first step. And I probably need with prospects now some sort of a deal or incentive to get them in, right? I need something that is going to create some momentum where there's been nothing but procrastination, pause, everything's on hold. So I really need something that is going to increase the value proposition. And I like the idea that instead of everybody I've talked to has said, well, should I slash my price? Should we cut prices? Should we be giving a sale? I like the idea that instead add value. What else are you going to provide as value add, and just keep loading on the value, right? The last thing you need is to cut your price, cut your margins, and be doing sales transactions where you make less money. So keep your price exactly where it is and just load stuff on, right? If I have a friend who has done a lot of training work. A lot of his training business has gone quiet. He's been doing more online training. But now he's including a series of webinars. He's including one-on-one coaching calls with each of the participants. He's including an ebook. I mean, he's built out an entire value add package so that the pricing for all this is comparable to him doing the live coaching. Because going from him doing, the live training, him doing live training at $10,000 a day to doing a $99 online webinar isn't going to cut it, right? He can't get 1,000 people into that program, or hundreds of people into the program. So we've had to figure out, how do we get the value back up to full strength? Next thing I mentioned is, hey, we've got new programs. There's got to be something new. We've adapted, we've pivoted, we've done something, but here's how we're now presenting it. Here's how we're offering our services for your customers. I mentioned again, guarantees, the same reason. You want to reduce the risk for people. I like the idea that maybe it's time sensitive, that, hey, for the next 60 days, here's what we're doing. People, if there's enough value, and 60 days, for anybody who's ever watched a late night infomercial, it's only available now. If you call now, you get the second set of Ginsu knives. There's a reason they do that in late night infomercials. It works. I like the idea that there's a gift with a purchase. I have seen the simplest example. I was in a liquor store the other day. I bought a bottle of vodka. I bought the one that came with a little sweater. If anybody knows, it's Tito's. And yeah, the little gift went a long way. I don't care what it is. I've seen gifting work with custom homes. I've seen it work with or meals ordered in for your home. I've seen it with consulting services. There's all sorts of gifting opportunities here. The last thing I'd ask you about prospective customers is, are they really prospects? And what I mean by that is so many people tend to go, well, we got 30, 35 people, and we just kind of rehash what's going on with the Smiths and the Johnsons and the Browns. And really you have to stop and say, are these people prepared to buy something? That might mean you ask them, are you interested in this service? Are you prepared to buy it? I had somebody, and if anybody wants to, I think my friend Kevin is on this webinar. Kevin and I have talked about the 9-word email. If you're interested in that, you're welcome to email me at the end and ask me about the 9-word email. I used it this morning and got an instant response back with the person saying, yes, 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 we're interested. I just need 2 weeks to be able to start. But so if you're not sure if they're prospects, you've got to be pointed in asking, because a no is better than a maybe. So let me ask you, our whole life is on Zoom these days. So how do you make Zoom, or the idea of virtual, an effective selling platform? And I think one of the critical ways to do that is try to bring back experience into a Zoom call. And what I mean by that is, you know, the ability to use something physical. So I have a book out and I sent it to a lady. And so in advance of things, I actually FedExed it around the world. She was in Saudi Arabia. And so I FedExed the book. It arrived at her doorstep in Saudi Arabia, and then we got on Zoom. The impact of the physicality of the book arriving and her being able to open it was an experience outside of our Zoom call, but it enriched our Zoom call. I'll give you that example for one of our clients who's a custom home builder. They build homes that are typically around $2 million. They used to have a great sales process where they would sit down with people at their show home or at one of their homes with an architect, with a designer. They would have wine, charcuterie, and they would brainstorm. And literally, the architect would draw renderings as they talked, and they would map it all out. And it was such an experience that 4 to 5 people said, let's go. And they moved towards a sale. He said, well, now what do? I'm stuck with Zoom. What they started doing was drop shipping the wine and the charcuterie at the people's door about an hour before the Zoom call. They still got everybody on Zoom, but now everybody was sharing, you know, so the prospects were having wine and charcuterie, were already loving the process, and then they get on Zoom. So you have to recognize that the experience is really not through the screen. It's all the other things you can send them in advance. It's the things that can show up by courier at that moment. If you don't have a courier FedEx account, the ability to be able to drop ship something on their door, you know, within a certain time frame. Don't use Canada Post because they've been a disaster through the COVID crisis for getting things there on time. Pay for the service so that there's a guarantee when it arrives. That's one of the best ways I've seen across all my clients of making things work. Yeah, and that can be not only for the idea of a sale, but also reconnecting with your customers is a great thing to do. Send them a basket that they can be enjoying and then zoom in to see how everybody's eating the basket in their boardroom, right? All the little treats and stuff they're sharing. So where else would I focus? I've talked about, you know, going back to customers first. I've talked about the ability to really dive into your prospects, the activity level that you need to increase to and how you need to measure that. Where we're talking to clients now is where can you generate a multiple sale versus a single transaction? And what I mean by that is, where is there someone who can buy from you 6 more times between now and December versus somebody that's going to do a single transaction? So with our contractor clients, you know, like the plumber, the electrician, we're looking for renovation companies that will be doing multiple deals. We're looking for the property management companies who have ongoing work. We're looking for the oil and gas guys are focused on clients who are going to be doing repeated projects, right? There's some that they know are just stalled for the next 6 months. We've just sort of put them on the back burner. We're only focusing on people where we think there could be multiple transaction opportunities. Another one for me is alliance partners. And I think this is a great place to be spending some sales time and prospecting. This webinar, in fact, is a great opportunity to promote and get in front of people. And I say that because Clay's clients, not all of Aiken Henderson's clients are my clients, obviously. Very few, they don't overlap, but there's people on this call that may not know me, but know Clay. They know Aiken Henderson. And so we're sharing this opportunity, doing this together, but it gets me in front of his client base. And I've promoted his name and the webinar series to all of my client base. And so I look to say there's again, the ability to reach a whole audience of people that typically wouldn't get at as a selling person, one prospect, one contact after another. So you have to look for leverage that way. I've been saying into the marketplace, offer to just help. Offer to be able to lend your expertise, to lend your credibility, to lend the ability to offer to help into the marketplace is going to drive some business. Maybe not immediately, so don't lose sight of the fact you got to be out doing selling activities. But I love the idea that if your intention is to be helping, you're inevitably going to come across opportunities. Another place I like is the idea of LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, because so many of us have hundreds and hundreds of prospects on LinkedIn and really never talk to those people. And so having a concentrated effort, and if you want information on some different tools you can use, whether it be Sales Navigator, plugins like DuckSoup, other things, there's all sorts of opportunity, and you can email me afterwards with just LinkedIn, and we can talk about that. So after all this, I want you to be able to just say to yourself, have I got enough leads right now? Have I got enough leads that I can see in the coming months, into the fall? And if the answer is no, then you have to look and say the lack of prospects and leads is also a lack of marketing. And so while the emphasis of this is around selling, if at the end of the day, you really are like, I've got all the time in the world and I have nobody to phone, you have to be able to look and say, well, let's make that a little easier than, traditionally years ago, you would have gone to the Yellow Pages and there was a giant book of at least companies you could phone. Now, because Google and a Google search is our primary platform, it's way more difficult to even build out those lists. So let's talk about ramping up your marketing. And this is something I touched on at the beginning of COVID, but I think it's just as relevant today, and I just have one slide on it. More marketing means AdWord campaigns. There are people for every single one of our clients, whether it's aviation services, pipeline surveillance, dam safety engineering, plumbing, electrical, legal services, family law. I mean, I could just go through the list of every single client we have. Financial services for seniors, you name it. People are searching for their services. If you don't have an active AdWords campaign, hire somebody. I can direct you to people. Clay can too, but you have to be doing some digital marketing that way. Updating your website, making all there's things that have changed about your business that people need to be able to identify. And remarketing, that when people are visiting your website, you're able to track them as they travel around the website and you are just popping up in front of them. If you don't know what remarketing is, glad to explain that or go over that later. Database marketing. Clients, and I'm talking to people over the last few months, they're sitting on hundreds and even thousands of names and email addresses and haven't sent out anything besides their COVID announcement saying they're closed. Man, there is gold within that database. Just keep asking people, making offers, inquiring, what do you want to see? But there's engagement there. I love the idea of an active referral program. I've got referral partners that we actively refer back and forth. I have a small network and it drives so much business. Google reviews, if you don't have an emphasis on that, you absolutely need to. It's the easiest way to get good rankings. I mentioned alliances. I mentioned LinkedIn as being critical. Advertorials are my favorite type. If you're going to spend money on advertising, advertorials that really profile your business or you as a business person are great. I put down the list again, posting on social, because people think that, oh, if I start an Instagram page that I'm going to get business from it. Maybe a year from now, but not likely, just based on the way social works and the visibility of your social postings to your whole network. Now, if you want to start an advertising campaign on social, that's different. And that does have merit, but that's a whole other animal to learn about the social environment there. And then the last thing I put is advertising. So I want to leave with this, because I think this is a critical piece. No matter, I have found that for anybody, whether it be a business owner trying to drive business for themselves, a salesperson, a sales team, consistency and persistence, they are number one, the way to success. And I want to build this out. And some people have probably seen this because they did this study and these are classic sales things, but I found it to be absolutely true. 48% of salespeople never follow up with a prospect. The number of times I've said to somebody, yep, I'm interested in talking, and there's been nothing, they never follow up with me. It boggles my mind how those people stay in sales. After that, another 25% of people will make a second contact and stop. And this is where all of us as business owners and salespeople start to say, oh, they haven't gotten back to me. I don't know if they're interested. And the story you tell is they're not interested, when that's not true at all. The story is they're busy. They're recovering from COVID and the pandemic. They're trying to restart their business. and get their own sales pipeline going. So the key here is that only 10% of salespeople, 1 in 10 people, makes more than 3 contacts. I have found that once I get somebody, my favorite expression, old school expression, was you either buy or you die. You never leave my database. And it's true that I know that 8 out of 10 of my sales are when I have reached out with people over and over again. I know that they have an interest. It's just no has always been a no, not right now. So consistency and persistence, stay with people. Don't just make a phone call or send an email and presume that they're uninterested. If you had a conversation with them a year ago, go back to them. There's still an opportunity there. But this idea of getting down to the where people won't go, when everybody else says I'm going to quit, you're the person who says I've got to stick with it. And your sales team has that same approach. If you know that you're going to do more on the sales side than your competitors are, you inevitably will have long-term success. The last things I want to leave you with are just my email, Marty Park. You can visit, my email is really easy. It's actually marty@martypark.com, or you can do it on my website. I have wrote this book, and it's 99 Secrets to Tame and Master Your Business, and you can check it out at tigerbythetailbook.com. But I'm glad to talk to anybody about sales strategy, sales ideas, sales challenges, or broader business strategy.